Hello, everyone, and welcome back for part two of this first Excel demo with the hypothetical student budget. In the last video, we walked through creating this from a blank spreadsheet. We learned about entering text. We learned about entering numbers and formulas. We did a function where we calculated the total amount. If I double click into a cell, in this case C14, I can see the sum function. One little thing, it's not necessarily in the textbook per se, but it is something that might be helpful. And even if you've used Excel for a long period of time, many people don't know this. There's a keyboard shortcut because, as I just did, normally if I want to see what's underneath the hood, I have to double click on a cell and then I can see the formula function, number, text, whatever is entered there. I can also see in the formula bar where my cursor is circling what the underlying equation or calculation is. But there are times where I might want to see all of the calculations at once. And so if you hold down the control key on your keyboard and the tilde sign, which is usually to the left of the number one, it will change the view of your spreadsheet from what you normally see, which is the text and numbers that are entered, and then the results of any other kinds of calculations or equations. When I do control tilde, it shows me the underlying formulas and functions in each of the cells. And obviously, I can't fit it all on one page quite in the same way as I had before because it expands the column widths and everything kind of blows up a bit. But it is a useful tool. Certainly, trying to understand a spreadsheet that you're given for a SAM project, it might be helpful. There are certainly situations in a work environment that are different than school. At school, you work on all of your own files. In many cases, Sam gives you a file and you build it out. In other cases, we're going to start with a blank file, you build it out. You own that file. We don't share those files with other people. School is very individualized in that way. But when you go into the workplace, you might get hired as an intern. You start June 1st. Your boss gives you access to some spreadsheets. They might have some changes or things they want you to improve. And you're going to inherit that spreadsheet and be asked and expected to be able to make those changes. And the first step is going to be, how do I understand what this thing does? Because I didn't build it. I wasn't involved with it earlier. The person who did it before maybe was an intern who is no longer here. And so being able to look at a spreadsheet, try to reverse engineer it is important because I need to know, is that a number that somebody just typed in there, or is there a calculation? And if it's a calculation, our calculations here are really simple: addition, subtraction, a sum function, some multiplication. But there are other times where the actual calculation could be quite complex, quite involved. As I mentioned last time, we can use the standard order of operations that you learned a long time ago and might need to review to build out any mathematical equation that you might see in a textbook or elsewhere. And so again, it's part of being a educated user of Excel that we can understand what a spreadsheet is doing before we then make modifications or changes and undo something unknowingly. And if I do control tilde again, it does bring it back to the view that we were at before. So it's a toggle. And so it's a nice way when people send me questions about homework assignments and so forth. I almost always use that control tilde to just kind of see what people have done or not done. When I grade things that are non-SAM items, I oftentimes use that to, again, see what you were thinking, see what you put into the spreadsheet to understand how you built it. Because as we go along, some of the assignments are going to be SAM-like. They tell you exactly what to do and where to do it and how to do it. We have to get used to that. And already I'm getting questions, which is not unusual, where people are doing the right thing, but sometimes not reading the instructions fully to put things in the right place. Again, SAM is very particular, and the slightest deviation from what it asks is going to mean that it takes points off. And so there is going to be a skill you're also developing in deciphering what SAM is marking right and wrong, and how do I interpret what it says, because it does give you some feedback. It's not giving you paragraphs. It's oftentimes a phrase, a sentence, and the problem-solving piece is, given that I know it's wrong, Sam is almost always right. So don't hope that, well, Sam made a mistake. I know what I'm doing. Almost always, I can figure out what that mistake is, and there really was a mistake. Part of it is, deciphering what is Sam telling you. And so in this video, I'm going to do just a little bit of formatting and a couple of items that relate more to chapter two. But again, these early demos are kind of covering the gamut from chapter one through three. And so we entered in the budget. We added a line for retirement savings last time. If I was going to print this, in this class, obviously it's virtual. You're not going to have the ability to hand me a piece of paper, but we still will talk about printing because, again, in the workplace, in your personal life, there are going to be times where you need to print out a document, a handout. Your boss is going to, need that spreadsheet or that information on a piece of paper or a PDF document that somebody else could print out. And so it's important to know the controls in Excel that deal with that. And so if I were to go File, Print, it's going to show me what this would look like in print preview. And it turns out, it's going to print January through June on the first page. I'm going to slide this off of here, but there's a trailing page. That 5% that I had in my setup is off on the second page. And obviously, if I printed that, it would be a waste of a second page of paper to just have that 5% out there. But also, I might not want every spreadsheet to be in this portrait mode. Because again, in Word documents, almost always you have the paper oriented, like you would when you write a paper for religion class. In spreadsheets, oftentimes the spreadsheets are wider. And so we oftentimes switch from portrait orientation to landscape orientation. I can do that here in print preview. If I back up out of the print preview, there's also a whole page layout ribbon in Excel that has a number of different things that have to do with margins, the orientation of the page. You can see it's set to landscape here. You have options around setting the print area. Again, you don't have to print the entire spreadsheet. You can pick and choose sections that you would print. And again, that's sometimes useful in a business setting. Sometimes there are sections of spreadsheets that have information that wouldn't always necessarily be uh, freely shared. If I'm a person in HR and I've got information on, say, the salary and benefits information of all employees, that's part of the HR function. But if I'm going to meet with the finance department and review upcoming performance reviews and salary increases, I don't want to necessarily share a list of all employees. That's confidential. And I might want to only print out the section of information for that particular manager or that particular supervisor. And so there are ways, as you've seen in chapter two, where you can set the print area. And if you restrict it, you can then clear it. You can also set page breaks. Where is it going to choose? And so if I go to let's see here. If I go to set print area, actually that's where which does something very similar. Oops. Sorry, I'm thinking the wrong thing here. Actually, the thing I want to show is not on this ribbon, but it relates to print area. And so I'll come to that here. There are settings on scale. So again, you can change the scale. One of the activities in chapter one had you change the scale. Again, you have to do that on the sheet that you are working on. And so in this case, we only have one sheet. And I mentioning sheets, you can give sheets names. So I could go down here and name this budget. And now that sheet has the name budget rather than the generic sheet one. And if I apply scaling or any of the other settings that I've talked about here, they are applied on this sheet. And so we have to be careful, especially as we start moving to bigger spreadsheets with 2, 3, 4 tabs. There are times where we might want this sheet to be printed out in landscape orientation. This sheet is going to be in portrait orientation. And so again, We have to think about these sheets as individual items, but they're in what Excel calls a workbook. It's sort of like pages in a three-ring binder. And eventually, we will talk about not just calculations on individual sheets. We start out that way in the first three chapters for sure, but chapter five is dedicated to the idea of three-dimensional spreadsheets. How do I interact with data that exists between the different sheets of a workbook? And they also talk about a little bit four-dimensional, where I can reference data in other workbooks. And so again, I can start to tie together different files in different locations, but have all that information come together in one place. And so if I wanted to think about printing and I wanted to view the printing, there is a view menu. Again, it has some duplicate items. You know, the zoom feature over there is again uh, found for setting the zoom scale. You can also set the zoom down here. So I'll say multiple times in Excel has multiple paths to the same solution. And so typically in most situations, you know, Sam doesn't care which way you did it. It just cares that you did it in the right place, you know, in the right cell or sheet, etc. The view is set to normal. That's what we normally see. If I switch to page break preview, it is going to see, and actually, before I accidentally set the print area to a single cell, but in this, I could go in and say, well, I only want to print the revenue information. I guess I have to go back to the page layout, say I want to set this as the print area. And now it will show me when I'm in print view that the page one, when I push print, or if I went to print preview, it would only print the area in white. If I go in and say, well, I'm going to clear the print area, get rid of that setting, now the entire thing is set to print in page one. And this file is relatively reasonably sized, so it fits on a single page. If things changed and it squeezed over onto two pages or three or four, again, when I'm in view, page break preview, I have the ability to change these. I can drag them. So instead of having to, you know, do it earlier, I can drag them in different directions. And I can also, if there were page breaks, you know, if I said I want to, I guess I can't do that here, but if I had page breaks, they show up as dash lines, and those are also draggable, where I can control where the break happens. And so again, we typically don't work, edit, enter information in page break preview, but we can always go back to normal view. And if I wanted to deal with a couple of things that have to do with headers and footers, again, in chapter two, they talk a little bit about headers and footers. Again, I can do headers and footers. I'm going to go to view, and there's a third view called page layout. And in page layout, I can see that my spreadsheet stays the same, but they add some room at the top here for headers. And if I click into one of those headers, you know, if I were to click over on the left-hand side, typically they break the header and the footer into three sections. It gives me the ability to type in a cursor to type. I can add header and footer elements. So if I want to put the current date in here, I could click on this date. And when I do that, initially you'll see something that looks foreign. It has the ampersand sign and then the word date in square brackets. That is a substitute, in a sense, or syntax for a command to enter in the current date. So when I click back into the spreadsheet, I'm in cell A2, it's going to show the date today. And what happens, instead of just typing 1/30/2025, which I could have, this is set as a command which will automatically update. And so anytime I open this file with this in the header, it will display the current date. And you might wonder, well, why would you want the current date on there? You know, I have a calendar, I got my smartphone, etc. One reason that some people put the date on there is if you print this, it will tell you the date that it was printed. And again, in school, assignments stay the same. You know, we might analyze a set of numbers, we, you know, do the calculations, and we're done. If I'm in the workplace and I'm working with a spreadsheet where the numbers change, orders come in, orders go out, people change their minds, the financial numbers change. I might want to know if I'm looking at a piece of paper, when was this printed? Was this last week's sales report? Was that this week's sales report? Was it a year ago? And so having the date on there gives a stamp of, when this was printed. And you can do the same. Another common one in the workplace is this thing called the file path. And so if I click on the file path in the right-hand side, and then I click in the spreadsheet, well, it's going to tell me where is this file located and what is the file called, which again, in individual schoolwork, you know or you should know what your files were called and where you save them and et cetera. When you're in the workplace, you'll likely have a computer, but that computer is connected to the network. And if I'm sharing files with 20 other people in my same department, they're probably not saved on just my computer. They're stored on a server or they're stored in a cloud. And so again, when somebody says, I want you to update this file that the last intern created, your first question is going to be, well, where do I find that file? How do I get access to it? And again, if it's, a printed document or somebody has a email copy in PDF form, having the file path will tell you, well, what drive is it on, what folder, what subfolders, etc. What's the file name called? So again, there's purposes here that we may not necessarily be as familiar with. A couple other things in chapter 2 related to formatting. I typically don't spend, and I should say, in this view, I see the headers, and if I scroll down, there's a footer section. Anything you put in the header and footer repeats, page to page. So if I had a spreadsheet that had 10 pages, I could put a page number element down in the footer, and it would automatically number the pages when you view it or print it. Or if you put the date in the top, like I did, it'll appear on the top of every page. And so, again, they're similar to the way that Microsoft Word does this. It's just that not everyone is, using headers and footers all the time in Microsoft Word. Uh, and in chapter 2, they spend some time talking about formatting. We did just a little formatting with dollar signs and so forth. You can certainly, apply color. So if I said, well, I want to, let's take the total expenses here. So if I said I want to highlight these total expense numbers, I have the choice of, changing background colors. One thing to note, when you're asked in SAM, it's going to give you very specific names for the color. Again, you want to make sure that you're matching, and if you're using the most current version, you should have no problem finding it. Sometimes the color names might be slightly different than what you might expect. I don't see the one here that another class had, but I think they called it indigo, which a lot of people might think of as blue. But when you looked at it and the shadiness of it, it was closer to a light black, and so. Again, you want to make sure that you're choosing the right color, and they'll never just say select red or yellow. There's going to be a very specific shade or style of it in the naming. And again, in chapter 2, you'll spend some time looking at formatting either individual cells or ranges of cells. Again, I can highlight a bunch of cells and apply a color. I can highlight a bunch of cells and format them all at once. And so I could go and right click format cells. And in chapter 2, this is where you spend a little more time going through the tasks of formatting. Well, what kind of data do I have? The category. I can play with the alignment. How do I display it? Is it vertical? Is it horizontal? Is it at an angle? Does it wrap, etc.? There's a bunch of different variations of ways that the text can be displayed. And then you can change the font size, all the things that, again, are identical to Microsoft Word. In Excel, you also have borders. So if I said, well, I want to put a square uh, border around this range of cells, well, I could choose that. And again, in this case, I'm picking the outside border, but note you got all kinds of styles. You can change colors. Again, lots of different bells and whistles when it comes to formatting. There's a fill section. Again, this is an alternative to what I did with the icon on the ribbon in terms of choosing the background colors. And again, they give you a whole set of colors. There's a fill effects where you can do some shading and different shading styles. They also have a more colors option, which gives you, if it comes up here, the entire color palette. And if you know the specific RGB number or other kinds of color codes, then you can make that text or background the specific color. And again, Sam is going to tell us what we want. But if you work in a corporate environment, if you work at Starbucks, there's a Starbucks green. You know, and they oftentimes, as a corporation, especially for outward facing items, will want you to use Starbucks green as the color, not just pick one of the green things that's close enough. And so, again, in SAM, primarily in chapter 2 is where they focus on formatting. In other areas, it's less of a emphasis, but certainly in the workplace, appearances are important. Making your spreadsheet look professional, matching the company colors, et cetera, could be an important part, especially if it's going to be something that you're presenting to an audience. Again, sometimes spreadsheets are used by people as a scratch piece of paper to do some calculations, find an answer. In other cases, people are presenting documents that are going to be put into PowerPoint presentations or shared in a Zoom presentation. And so again, there's levels of attention to those kinds of details. I'm going to click OK. Or I should mention, we'll come back to it, but there is a last tab here called protection. In chapter 2, we don't focus on that, but there are things we'll talk about later in the course, because right now, when we build a spreadsheet or we're given a spreadsheet, the assumption is we have complete control. As I will oftentimes say in this course, the good news is, Excel will do whatever we tell it to do. If we tell it to do the wrong thing, unfortunately, it will do the wrong thing. We are the master of Excel, or we will become a master. But as we build spreadsheets and learn how to do the calculations and become good at the creation, at some point we're going to want to give these spreadsheets we built to other people, and we may not want them to do what they want to do with it. We may not want them to go in and edit the numbers or edit the calculations or so forth. And so we'll talk about changing the spreadsheet from something that is a tool that we, as a user, are able to do anything and everything we want. But we want to make the spreadsheet more like an app, in the sense that when I use an app that I download from the web, it allows me to do certain things, but it doesn't allow me to go in and change the price at McDonald's or change the color scheme of the golden arches or whatever it might be. Lots of it is locked down, and there are very specific things that a user is allowed to do. And in Excel, we will eventually get to that point where we want to build a spreadsheet as an application for other users. And that gets us thinking in a different way, because right now, we know what we want it to do. We can, or we'll learn how to know what we want it to do. But when we want to, build it and ensure that it's correct and that it's valid and that changes aren't being made, we need to lock things down. And so we will eventually get to that point where we can build spreadsheets for others that are controlled for very particular purposes. And so that's a quick overview of just a few things related to formatting. I'll be back in the next video and talk about a separate topic on date functions and then eventually financial functions. Have a good day.